What will you do if the candidate that you want to win the 2024 presidential election actually loses? Well, in today's episode, I am being interviewed by Will and Josh of the Faithful Politics podcast, and I answer questions such as this, along with other ways that we can engage in a meaningful conversation with individuals who disagree with our political beliefs, with our different religious and political beliefs combined, how we can avoid stress during this political season, as well as how to balance out news consumption. So be sure to listen in, and I will be back at the end of the interview.
On our YouTube channel, we're glad to have you. I'm your political host, Will Wright, and joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. What's up, Josh?
Hey, doing great. Thanks, Will.
And we have with us returning my favorite clinical psychologist, Dr. Renee Carr. She's the host of the wonderful and magnificent Politics and Psychology. So if you love politics and psychology, that's the one to listen to. And she provides national media commentary to give clarity, truth to breaking news, crisis, pressing issues. She applies psychology, which is really cool, like to help high-profile elected officials and CEOs solve all kinds of social problems, and today she's here to solve all of mine and Josh's problems. Welcome back, Renee.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I do have to say, like, your podcast is pretty good.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know how, like, I could never do what you do. Like, I need somebody to talk to.
I feel like I need someone to talk to too.
Every now and then, we all need someone to talk to, don't we?
Yes. And when I had other actual radio shows, I did always have like a co-host. And before this one, it was Provocative Conversation that we were co-hosting together, but then she ran for office, and I was like, well, I still feel called to do it, so I guess it's just me.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know how folks do it, but I don't know. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The last time we had you on, you were actually helping us kind of understand the mental state of President Biden and Trump, and seems like a lot's happened since the last time we've spoken.
Indeed.
We have a new presidential-elect person, Kamala Harris, and I won't necessarily ask you to do like a psychoanalysis, but maybe I can just get your quick takes, and then we can get into something a little more substantive.
Okay.
So
on what, Kamala Harris?
Yeah.
Well, I think she definitely is a prosecutor. So let me give a different spin, like a behind the scenes spin. Okay. So one of the reasons why so many people did not like her in her office or chief of staff, there was a high turnover, is because she's a very, very aggressive female, very dominant. And I think, but that helped her in all of her other pursuits that she had to prosecute issues, human trafficking, etc. So I think that when you look at the dynamics of females in leadership versus males in leadership, males, it's always like a sport. We know who's the captain, who's the assistant coach, who's, playing defense, who's the quarterback. But when, so everyone falls in line, whether it's business, politics, or personal or sports. But with women, we always want everyone to be on the same level. You're not better than me, or you think you're better than me. And so what I really think happened, why she had a very unfavorable rating with her staff, is because she's an aggressive female, used to being in a very male-dominated atmosphere. And the women who were in those positions were probably very entitled and very probably cute, and didn't really have anyone to hold them accountable for productivity, and more so just on, you knew someone and that's how you got into this White House position. And so, but now that they tried to spin it in the first day, they were like, oh yeah, everyone's behind her now. She has such a high turnover. Now she has really good staff. If you might have heard some of those sound bites, that's because they had people who were actually wanting her to win versus trying to keep her lower. And also people who were able to support her being an aggressive, assertive female and not being intimidated by her being in power.
That makes a lot of sense. And like, what do you make of, there's a lot of talk about DEI hiring, stuff. And I mean, you're a Black woman. I'm a Black man. Like, I'm sure this isn't the first time you've probably heard, DEI used in a way that seems to really strive away from its intended purpose. And I'd love to just get your thoughts on DEI, and maybe while you're on that is connected to something that you talked about on one of your episodes, which I thought was just so fascinating, like the connection between DEI and like nepotism.
Right.
So yeah, talk to us about that.
So DEI came out after I had stopped working for anyone, so never really had anyone to that to me because I've been in business for so long. But I think that what I was saying in my episode is that for you to automatically assume that Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, that goes to your core belief. So you have your automatic thought, then you have your core belief that comes from that. And so to say instantly that anyone who is a Black female, Indian female, Asian male, anyone who was non-white and they have a position, if they are an automatic DEI hire, then that shows that your core belief means that, well, only white males are actually qualified to be in this position. Even if you were a white female, you could be considered a DEI hire. Like they were saying, like the FBI officers who were there for former President Trump at the assassination attempt. They were saying on Matwar, so many different platforms, that's because they had females there because they were DEI hires. And so that just means that you're just assuming just right away. And so if you assume that, then that means that you then are working from a place of pride and arrogance and entitlement to think that anyone who has a position, it should only be white males who are white heterosexual males who are hired. And anyone else is a DEI hire, especially if it's a place of influence or power. So then I juxtapose that with, you can't then say we can't have a DEI hire because you're Black, because you're female, or because you are non-white. If you're a position of power, then you had to just be a DEI hire, and that's sinful and that's wrong. But if my daddy gave me this job that I didn't work for, I'm not qualified for, or if my father or my grandfather was a donor to this institution, and that's how I got to come to the school, even though I didn't have the SAT scores to qualify it, that's okay. Like, we're okay with nepotism as long as it favors us.
Yeah, that's terrible, and that's got to be really infuriating to a lot of people. I know your role in applying psychology to political and social crises. I love that expertise that you have. What help me as a leader and others like me as a leader thinking about DEI, thinking about inclusion, thinking about wanting to get a more diverse workplace, a more diverse church, right? Which inherently involves people that have differing opinions, which then inherently involves conflict, and then assuming that they're going to be able to handle conflict or do it well, or, what's their emotional IQ. Help leaders like me think about, how do I apply this stuff that, we're talking about, like thinking about Kamala Harris's cabinet.
Right.
What's going on there? How do I take these principles and transfer them to what I'm doing and trying to create a church that's diverse, or workplace, or what have you?
Excuse me. One of the things I like to think about is, you all know I'm a foodie, so a menu. So no one wants the same thing every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and every day, all the time. So if you think about it from what can they add to us, rather what do we have to give to them to make them feel included, then that can take away a sense of feeling as if your rights are being taken away, or that you have to acquiesce for anyone who is outside of your culture just because your government's telling you to, or just because you have a DEI mandate or minority hiring mandate, or an inclusion mandate. So I like to think of it as, well, if I can pick and choose what I want, sushi or Italian, or obviously my dessert, if I can pick that without any type of negativity because I want it to add to me, then whether I'm doing a church or a political cabinet, what do I need to add to me that they can bring to enhance what we are all doing? And doing that selection from a place of, I'm not right. I'm not going to be 100% complete or satisfied if it's just me or people who look and talk just like me. But how can I have the best of all worlds and have a fully diverse and delicious, menu of cultures?
I love that. That sounds delicious.
Yeah. I also come from a
delicious.
military background, so I like having the different cultures. What were you saying, Josh?
I was saying it's making me hungry thinking about it.
I know. It's almost dinner time.
So last time again, we talked about Trump, his sort of mental state. I'm not going to sort of rehash any of that, but I do want to talk about Trump's mental state post-assassination. Mm-hmm, I mean, having been to a war environment, having been shot at, having friends killed, and seeing all that stuff, I think has an impact on somebody. I mean, regardless of how you feel about Trump, I think that, that there's something to be said about if he did turn his head, whatever the distance was, he would be dead. So what happens to a person, I guess, when there's an attempt on their life, and how should we perceive his actions? Where should we show him some grace? And what should we know?
Well, one of the core requirements for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a very real threat on your life, or either seeing someone's life taken away and not expecting that to happen, like not expecting to see a child killed or a child's dead body. So when you have a very real experience of your life possibly being threatened, then that is traumatic, regardless of who you are. And I think that we can see him kind of, being disheveled lately ever since that time, a little kind of dozing out, sleeping a lot as a way to kind of suppress intrusive thoughts, intrusive memories of, is someone going to shoot me? Is someone not going to shoot me? But also it's a big attack to your self-esteem when you do have narcissism. Like, not only was my life an attempt on my life, but that means that someone didn't like me. And so when you have that narcissism plus PTSD, that's a real insult to your psychological ego. And so you're going to then go into a fighting mode. And when you're fighting, like, have you ever seen those girls, it's like, I don't know if you said like in the hood, they would fight like this. Then it's like, you just come out, you take your earrings off, like you're just fighting wild, rather than having like a strategic 1-2 punch, because you're fighting wild because you're all emotional. It's like girls are fighting like this. Guys are like more strategic, knowing where to punch the blows. And so I think that he's becoming more erratic because there was a huge insult to his life and his psychological ego, not social ego. And that makes a person feel very low. And he's not used to, as a person with narcissism personality disorder, that is a huger blow to his life and his well-being and mental status than the actual bullet itself.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is amazing. And I totally get what you're saying. And I really resonated with it. Like, I vibe with it because I'm thinking, man, if something like that happened, I would be having so many different thoughts.
Right.
About my own value. I'd be having thoughts like literally that was an inch from my head.
Yeah.
And in the one sense, I feel like it would bring a really deep sense of vulnerability to me. Mm-hmm. And then at the other kind of ironic end, it might make me feel like I'm in some way invincible.
Right.
Because I wasn't touched by it. So it's like, how does one, how do you think that kind of plays itself out, this struggle between, well, number one, do you think that's an accurate analysis?
Yeah, I think that's really good.
What might be happening? How might that play itself out?
I think that you have, so at the core of narcissism, you have inconsistent and unhealthy relationships with your parents. So usually if it's a boy, it would be his mother. And so, and I think although his father was there, I don't know how emotionally available their parents were to him. So narcissism is a self-created fantasy of your greatness and omnipotence. And so you continue with that, and the more success you have, as Trump had in his real estate, before the fraudulent stuff, but he still became very successful enough to become our president. So the more that his narcissism is reinforced, like I am invincible, I do win at all the things that I do. When that's attacked, then that's like when you have like an ice pick and then it starts to shatter the glass or shatter the ice. And so it's putting those cracks in there to his actual ego that will have to then go to childhood wounds that have never been healed. So the way to continue that is to continue acting and having your immediate response as I'm invincible, holding up the fist, fight, fight, fight. But then when you're at nighttime and your quiet time, when you're thinking about, wow, I really was almost killed, that's when you can't really keep up the cover. So then you'll have a person have like a psychotic break after a while, because I'm used to being this person. This ego has been all I have been, and that ego has made me successful, has made me a multi-millionaire, has made me generational wealth for multiple legacies. So it works for me. But that's only because I'm covering up a wound that I had. So if this is now becoming bigger and it's highlighted that I'm still not healed, people don't like me, they didn't want me to be born, hashtag my mother or my parents, then that goes to my heart of why I even became narcissistic. And I can't continue both at the same time. So then there will be a break.
It just makes a lot of sense. So I want to talk about kind of the responses, and then I want to get into a little bit of forgiveness. But like the responses to Trump's assassination, was all over the place.
Yes.
It ranged from, wow, I didn't realize, this person was so caring, to, dear God, just stay off social media,
Yeah.
And I've never really quite understood like somebody that physically wishes somebody harm, or death, especially when like I don't think that person has it in them to murder somebody.
Right.
So like why do people do that? Like why do people respond in the way that they do, and then it's almost like spur of the moment, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that, because now the media and now the Congress and now Trump's tweeting my name out, like,
Right.
like why do people do that?
Well, you also have to think about how the fire of fear has been stoked politically. And so you can have a person who is normal, planning on living a long life and having grandchildren. But if I'm living in a world where I'm constantly being told that my life, my way of life, my children's way of life is threatened, and if you don't act now, your very way of freedom is going to be taken away. So that goes back to that wild fighting. You're going to then go into survival mode, which are the lower or one of the basic hierarchy of needs. You're going to then go into survival mode. I'm going to protect my country. I'm going to protect my family, my community. I'm going to protect my children to come. So in those instances, if they don't have obviously like psychological disorders, you're then succumbing to the pressure of social media, the pressure of the news to then create a narrative where you have to vote for this person. Otherwise, you're going to all be dead tomorrow. And so, well, I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to be dead. So then I will fight. So in some ways, it could be seen as a noble way of defending your country, because you're trying to fight for the best of our country and not the stoking of fear.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And, one of the things that I know that you've kind of addressed in a fascinating thought experiment is to think about the need to forgive leaders, in particular, thinking about Trump and Biden, right? So either side of this polarization we have, right, there is a way in which we demonize the leaders, right, of the opposite political party. Part of that, really, I see this demonization all over the place.
Yes.
And I would love for you to go into the kind of psychology behind this political division, the psychology there, what kind of psychological processes are occurring that's creating that. You've mentioned fear. So even if you want to go deeper into the fear of that, and then kind of help us understand how forgiveness is an antidote to that.
Okay. So from a psychological as well as a spiritual, since this is faith and politics, what happens is on a basic level, think about if you were in a string of bad relationships. They cheated on me, they stole from me, they killed my mom, it was horrible. But now this one comes along, I think, he or she is the one. And so I'm putting so much faith into projecting my fantasy of perfection on this person that I don't give that person the opportunity to truly be who they are, because I only see them as a reflection of what I want them to be, how I want them to be. And so the demonization comes in because of cognitive dissonance. I have to believe that this is the supreme choice politically. I have to have more and more faith in this person, despite what I may see publicized about them being human and making mistakes. And I have to keep that up because I can't face the other fears that I have, the other disappointments and pain. And politically, I can't go back to a country that I didn't like or that didn't favor me. And so I'm going to put all of my hopes into this. And in order to make that justified psychologically, I then have to demonize the other person. I had to make this person seem as horrible and as evil as possible, the greatest threat to my country and family, so that I can justify glorifying this person. But whenever it's a relationship or a president, if you put so much of your projected fantasies of perfection onto that person, they're going to disappoint you even more because you're not able to see that they were going to disappoint you because they are human. So then instead of that person being a demon, you then see the other person as a god, and then you worship them. And that can get you into cult-like thinking. It can get you into believing that they can do anything and nothing is wrong. Or it could prevent you from seeing that they are just a person in a political position who is still going to make mistakes. So you can forgive if you recognize that no one person is the great savior politically. No one is the great Satan politically. Everyone is making mistakes. Everyone has their own agendas. Their lobbyists have their own agendas. But what is the best choice for me and my family? Being fully aware that they are going to make mistakes. And that makes forgiving a whole lot easier by expecting. Like with these, the saying about marriage, you go into a marriage with your eyes shut, and then you had to keep your eye. What is it? You go into with your eyes wide open, and then after you get married, you keep one eye shut. So you're expecting to not see all the negatives, and you still have hope for voting and still doing your civic duty, but then know that at the end of the day, it's still a human, and then that's why I'm not going to put so much of my fantasy of perfection onto them.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking about the average person that is trying to work through the constant bombardment of political messages that they're getting that are trying to stoke this fear.
Yes.
And so how does the average person, someone listening to this podcast, they're coming in here, they're exhausted by the constant fighting, and yet they don't know how to separate these different messages from the truth, right? Because it sounds like what you're saying is forgiveness is actually, that's an exercise of truth telling. That's an exercise of trying to perceive the truth about the world, and that other people are at play here. There are other minds at work. They have their own motivations. They have their own incentives. They have their own background knowledge that helps them understand the world around them. And so, but thinking for an average person, right, what they're trying to do is this condensing all this stuff into one message that distorts reality. So how do we, as the average person, how do we combat this in our own political discourse, in our own media consumption?
I think, again, by accepting the reality accepting the truth that most media is biased. It's not a coincidence that you can go to Fox News and hear one message consistently, and then go to MSNBC and hear one message consistently. So if you recognize, without becoming hopeless, that people in media have their own agendas, they have wealthy owners who have their own agendas politically. So if I recognize that I'm not going to get the whole truth from any one social media outlet or any one news channel, but I'm going to have a comprehensive view. I always try to encourage people, listen to both channels, see what both sides are saying, and in there somewhere will be the consistent truth. But also you have to go into it with what are my own biases. Am I only listening to Fox because I want that to get me angered and I want to go get fired up to do something? Am I only listening to CNN because I want it to reinforce what I already want to hear? And so that shows if you are selectively only viewing one channel over another and not even entertaining any other type of news outlets, then that means that you are already biased. And so when you hear more and more information that's going to get you upset, that's going to try to chip away at your belief that this is the ideal, prophesied candidate. So I'm fully invested in believing this. And so if you come against that, now I'm angry, now I'm wary because I can't handle the truth. I can't receive the other information to have a well-rounded understanding. So I would say first, look inside introspectively. Well, what are my own beliefs? What are my own biases? What do I want the news to say? What do I want the news to reinforce what I think? If you set that aside, okay, well then what am I doing to make that happen? Okay, I'm only listening to this one channel so that I can hear this all the time. And so, can you see me? Okay. And so then what I'll do is say, okay, well, I don't want to do that. I do want to have a whole person view and I do want to be unbiased. So then I will say, honestly, well, I do favor this candidate and I do want to see the other person not just lose, but demolished. And so recognize your own biases and then say, okay, well then I can decrease my own stress by either not listening to any news that's going to get me upset or get me fired up, or I can listen to 30 minutes one day on one channel, 30 minutes the other day on another channel. That way you're not hearing constant messaging. It's going to get you upset. It's like with 9/11. If you keep watching, the buildings, that's traumatic. You saw it. If you're reacting, if you're getting emotional, then take a break and then come back to hearing news and maybe a different kind of news, not a visual, just maybe a podcast about it or just the news about it.
Man, I just want to say this real quick, that if people would just listen to that and apply that to their lives, the increase in net happiness, I feel like would be so significant. I just wanted to say that. Beautifully said. I really hope people listen to this and then apply this.
Yes, thank you, Josh. My dissertation was in happiness, by the way.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
that makes me think so many questions I have.
Did you happen to send a copy to Pharrell Williams for him to
Oh, yeah, to add to it. No, that was, I'm way older than you guys. I think I'm way older than Pharrell. So Happy was I don't think Pharrell was even born when I was doing that.
Oh, my word.
Well, what I wanted to say was I wanted to just clarify something that you said, or not to clarify what you said, but at least clarify my own view about the media, where, like, I agree. I think the media is biased as an institution, but like the people that help bring the stories to those organizations, while they may have their own biases, like I think that like I'm a big journalist fan. Like you'll never find a bigger fan. Like I follow the journalists, like not the
channel.
Yeah, not the channel, not the media organization. So like if it's like international coverage, like Trey Inks from Fox News does a great job. Jennifer Griffin, great job. They're from Fox, and I'm a liberal. But like on the other side, it's like there are some other reporters that Olivier Knox, we had him on the show. He's worked for Washington Post, like super like reporter. And I think that people, if they're looking for a different way to consume news, like that's one way. I might be a little like, I don't know,
No,
centuries.
I think that's a good way. I know there's a lot of independent news channels and social media outlets that are promoting that as well. The only thing is that when I look at them from a psychological point, are you really unbiased? Then you can still be unconscious bias by only putting shows that still favor what you think, but in a non-biased way.
Yeah.
So if I'm only a dessert lover, I'm going to be unbiased by having all desserts. I'm not going to discriminate with only chocolate. But if I'm not also including like salty, soft pretzels, then it's like, okay, well, I'm not truly being unbiased. And so they're being biased unconsciously through selective bias. But there are at least 2 or 3 that are really good.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, you mentioned earlier something about cognitive dissonance. I definitely want you to kind of describe it, but I want to just tell you about the context in which the question originates. It seems like we live in this time where, you know, that doesn't make sense. Like the Democrats are putting up a nominee who was a prosecutor, a cop, you know, like Democrats are supposed to hate the police, you know?
Right.
And I saw this meme floating around the other day where it's like a person had a "back the blue" like sign in their yard, and then right next to it said, "I'm voting for the felon."
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah,
like these things don't make sense. So explain to me what's happening here. But maybe start us off by just telling us what is cognitive.
So I think that's actually a great example of cognitive dissonance. So in the short version of or definition, cognitive dissonance is when I have 2 separate beliefs. Meaning, I believe, I'll stick with dessert. I believe that all dessert is a way to reward yourself, but then I feel like, okay, but chocolate is also bad. So in order to make myself give permission to eat dessert by still thinking that chocolate is good, but dessert is bad, then I will then say, oh, but I deserve it. Oh, but it's on sale, which your wives might say to you all the time. Oh, I got a good deal on it, or, oh, it's my birthday. And so with cognitive dissonance, you have 2 core beliefs that are very strong on both sides. And depending on your faithfulness to one belief over the other will be how much you'll stick to those behaviors that line up with that belief. So if I'm backing the blue, but I'm voting for the felon, or I'm backing the blue and then voting for Harris, if she's, against it, then I'm saying, okay, well, I say that I'm doing one, but I'm going to still more do the other. That's making me more comfortable. But so that would be one example. But I also want to preface it by saying 2 things can be true at one time. So I'm former military, so I'm not, but my whole family is. So I'm definitely all about military, paramilitary. We sacrifice so much as dependents, and people in the military for that. So I do think that you can have a way of still backing the blue, but then also have what are protections in place for those who have more controlling personality styles or rogue personalities where they're going to put a bad name on the blue. So if you're having that type of thought, it's not cognitive dissonance. It's like, I do believe both at one time. So if you're talking about backing the blue and then I'm voting for the felon, was that the example of voting for the felon? So that's just like, but that's also a bigger core belief is what's holding those 2 together. Right. I'm backing the blue because I feel like all Democrats don't care about the police officers and how they sacrificed our lives. I also may have some racist tendencies to believe that if they kill someone and they happen to be a minority, that minority probably deserved it, and you're unfairly punishing the blue. At the same time, I'm going to then also vote for the felon, because he is someone who I also think is being unfairly treated in the media, and they're labeling her as a prosecutor. So they're already giving her more favorable light than him. So I'm voting for both of them because my core belief is that both are being treated unfairly. So you can have on the surface cognitive dissonance, but at the bottom, what is the core belief that's connecting both of them?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me, because the reasoning that I see is that, hey, back the blue, I'm voting for the felon, but there's irony in this, right, or sarcasm, because I don't actually think he's a felon. I think he was unfairly prosecuted, judged, whatever it is, right? So it's like at both times saying I'm going to back this idea of the justice system in one side, and then this other idea of the justice system I'm actually attacking simultaneously.
Right. That it's a joke, tongue in cheek, you know, yes, he got these charges, but that was really unfair.
Yes. And so, like, how do you work in a conversation like that to help someone think about kind of almost the metacognition of what's going on there, and taking a look at their own thinking and applying some kind of critical standards to it, so that, you know, we can all get to a place where, like, hey, yeah, this is how I think. I definitely have bias. I have these things that are based on my background information, but I at least can take a step back and start asking the places where there are gaps, and at least I can be open to more data.
Well, excellent question. I love how you use metacognition. Great psychological word. I like that.
Big brains on Brad.
Yes. I think that you would just have to be a person who is able to have humility and able to say, I'm wrong. So in order for you to truly say, I do have biases and I do still believe a certain way, and there are gaps, you have to recognize I have gaps, but I also want to change them, versus I have gaps and that's just who I am. So at the heart of it, do you really want to be open, or do you want to stay how you are? So when you're going to have a conversation, first ask in a non-threatening way and without using the word why, because why puts individuals on defense in our country, because they're seen as being put on a judgment seat. So then what you would say is, well, what are your strongest beliefs about X, Y, and Z? And then you kind of do a forensic analysis, meaning you kind of go deeper and deeper and see why. Because what you want to get is to eliminate their resistance. And you eliminate resistance by finding out what is their core belief or their underlying thoughts about why they feel this way or why they're responding this way. And so if you ask them more to talk about their own thoughts and their own feelings and positions politically, then you can introduce, now that you've kind of like got them talking about themselves, and feel accepted and belonging to you psychologically, but also helps to reduce their resistance. And once you do that, then you can have a gentle introductory conversation about what your thoughts are. So then you're playing on the social cues of, well, I've given you a favor. Now you know socially to then give me back a favor of listening to me. But if you also, but your goal is to mold their thinking or change their voting behavior patterns, so that your introduction of your viewpoint has to be a lot gentler, and you'll have repeated gentle conversations for them to feel less resistant and less offended. So it's not just a one-day seminar and kumbaya. It's understanding how they came to that resistance. That, and by you asking how they came to that, it helps to reduce the resistance to then hear your messaging.
Wow. So we have an election coming up. And I can already guess how most people's election night's gonna roll, like November 5th. It's going to be people listening to the radio, watching TV, seeing the results, seeing, you know, whatever MSNBC's like Magic Board. Steve, what's his name?
Yeah, he's a cool guy. Steve K something.
and I don't know if you saw the skit, like Leslie Jones, like loves that man. Like if
I love him just like I love Michael Phelps. Somebody who is so nerdy and you're just so passionate and excellent about it. It's like, I have to love you just because of Nerds Unite.
Well, so millions of people across the country glued to their TVs, seeing results come in for their candidate. And at a certain point in time, there's going to be like a realization where their candidate didn't win, or they realize this is not going in the right direction.
Right.
And whether you're voting for Harris or whether you're voting for Trump, I get the sense that in that moment, there's going to be like a flood of, we'll call them conspiracy theories.
Yes.
That kind of help explain, like what's happening. So like what are some, I don't know, good mental exercises or tips for all those millions of people that are going to go through the exact same sort of like mental process?
Okay, so we can use the psychological technique of inoculation. So when you inoculate yourself, like with a medicine, you give them an injection of it so that if they have exposure to it, their resistance is built up already. When you have inoculation for like counseling, what are some of the reasons of why you would not do the homework for today? Oh, because the game is on, or oh, because Bridgerton is on, or I just don't feel like doing it. So then by introducing that resistance, you then say, okay, well, then when you have that thought, then we're going to do this. So we can apply the same techniques when it comes to election night. What will you do if your candidate does not win? What will you start thinking about yourself? What will you start thinking about this country, about your family? And then what can you do to still be happy despite the outcome? So start thinking about the possibility of losing. And also that can help go against the thought of, well, if I lose, then, we're all going to go to, the end of the world in a fire basket. So if you can start bringing in some reality to loss being possible, and if loss is possible, it's not going to be the true, doomsday, then,
Right.
okay, well, then I'll be less heartbroken, less angry if I am beginning to accept the possibility of loss.
But what if it is actually the end of the world if the other person wins?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that will be the case.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah.
Because it can feel existential,
Yes.
when these things happen. It definitely can. And that tie, that existential tie is really similar to me, like in the religion, in the faith. Like you talk about the core beliefs a lot, right? And
Right.
how can you talk about core beliefs without thinking about faith or someone's religious beliefs? That's why I think political beliefs and religious beliefs are sister beliefs.
Yes.
I think that they're on the same kind of level, that they reveal a lot about a person's thoughts and fears and ambitions and all that kind of stuff. How does faith influence decision making?
I think that another great question, by the way, Josh, existentialism. I think that when you can have faith and still be a politician or still be an activist, if you remember first and foremost where your help comes from, where your provision comes from. And so if you're worshiping God, let me put my charger in. I'll be right back.
Yeah, you're fine.
I just marked it, Josh.
Sweet.
All right, hold on. I didn't realize the battery was being used up
Oh.
Hey,
so much. Okay.
it's all good.
All right. All right. Can you hear me or see me?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you think from that perspective that I'm worshiping God, relying on God, and not who is in office, then even if it is the end of the world, even if it is COVID-25, then he got me through worse situations, then he will still get me through this because he is my provider. And I'm putting my beliefs and hopes in him and not in one man or one woman.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Man, this has been such an awesome conversation, Renee. Thank you so much for coming on and having it with us. How can people follow your work, and how can they get a hold of you and connect with what you're doing?
Well, definitely follow the podcast, Politics and Psychology, on Instagram, YouTube, and also all podcast, not YouTube anymore, but all podcast channels, including Instagram, or me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter /X on @Dr. Renee Carr.
You know, I was gonna ask. I don't know if you've seen. Apple TV has a show called like Lessons in Chemistry.
Okay.
That is all about this like woman. This takes place, I don't know, 60s, 50s or something. This woman who super smart in chemistry, wasn't really getting a chance to kind of move up because she's a woman. So she ends up like becoming famous and starts a cooking channel where she uses all these.
Oh, I read the book. Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, and yes. I didn't read it, but it was on Audible. I listened to it.
Yeah. And I was
thought
like,
that was great.
With your psychology, like understanding background and your love of food, I'm just throwing that out there, like lessons in psychology.
Yes.
That is a good thing to do. That is a really good idea.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, I really have this idea. I really want to have dinner with Dr. Renee. And I just want people to come and have conversations with me, like at a dinner, and then we can talk about it. But then I've always
That's
had
a good YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about doing that. Then I had to find out, okay, well, but at that time, it was mostly, people in Congress. So they're not going to just come and lay their, issues out on YouTube. That'll just be us behind the scenes. So that maybe I should return to that idea.
No, I like the dinner with Dr. Renee. Actually,
yes.
It's really cool. Although, you should have like a big Bubba, like someone like back here though, because people be crazy these days. But
oh yeah, they definitely would be pre-screened.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Thanks again, Renee, for everything.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed being on the podcast. And I will include the links for the Faithful Politics website, their YouTube channel, their social media handles as well in the description of this episode. I also want to let you know that this is our 61st podcast episode. So thank you. Congratulations to you for listening to me, whether it was for one or all 61 of these, so that we can help inform ourselves and also inform others. So we will be ending this season 3 with this episode. And when I return in 2 weeks, we will have the launch of season 4. So I'm really excited about that. I have 2 extra new things that I want to add in to help expand our impact through the website, reaching more people and making a greater impact in the social media space, as well as in your own communities and your families. So thank you for listening for season 1, 2, and 3. Thank you for listening to just one episode, if that's all you listened. But I thank you in advance for continuing to listen. And with all of my heart, thank you for allowing me to be able to follow my purpose, to be able to educate people with unbiased news that's intelligent, to make meaningful change for you, your family, and our country. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
And if you